This is a segment on the integumentary system continued, and this segment in particular is talking about the dermis. We already discussed the more superficial layer of the skin or the cutaneous membrane, which is called the epidermis. The layer of skin just below the epidermis is called the dermis. And below the dermis is another layer which is called the subcutaneous layer. But the subcutaneous layer is not really a part of the dermis. The subcutaneous layer contains many adipocytes or fat cells, as well as many blood vessels that extend their branches up into the dermal layers. This network of arteries in the subcutaneous layer extend their branches up into the dermis, but they do not extend up into the epidermis. The epidermis is avascular and does not contain any blood supply. There are also nerve fibers found in the dermis, and these nerve fibers help to control blood flow secretions from glands, and they also monitor the sensory receptors in the dermis and deeper layers of the epidermis. The sensory receptors help to monitor sensations like pain or temperature changes or vibration in the skin, and they will relay that information then to these sensory neurons, which send the information back to the central nervous system. The dermis contains two different layers, a papillary layer and a reticular layer. The papillary layer is the more superficial layer that consists of areolar tissue and contains both capillaries and sensory neurons. Capillaries are small blood vessels. Sensory neurons detect changes or stimuli on the skin. The deeper layer is called the reticular layer. The reticular layer consists of dense, irregular connective tissue. The collagen fibers from this dense, irregular connective tissue extend into the subcutaneous layer. The dermis also contains accessory organs, which we'll see, like hair follicles and sweat glands, that will extend all the way through the dermis and even through the epidermis. Here we're seeing one hair, but we're not seeing the hair root below it or the hair follicles. The hair extends up through the epidermis and actually past the surface of the skin. The dermis contains water, and the water content helps to maintain flexibility and resiliency. If a person's dehydrated, that reduces the flexibility and resilience of the dermis. How flexible and resilient the dermis is called turgor or skin turgor, and we can see a person that is dehydrated when you pinch the skin. It doesn't return to its normal flattened shape, and we would say that that person has poor skin turgor when they are dehydrated. Aging and hormones and excessive exposure to sunlight will reduce the elastin content in the fibers and will cause wrinkles. Stretch marks result when the elastic limits of the skin are exceeded. So the elastic content gets stretched out beyond its capacity and then cannot return to their normal length. The collagen fibers in the dermis and the elastic fibers align in a certain direction to resist stress on the skin during normal movement. Here we can see these collagen and elastin fibers are aligned in what are called lines of cleavage. A cut that's made parallel to the line of cleavage will allow that cut to close quickly and heal quickly, whereas a cut that's perpendicular to the lines of cleavage will be pulled open and will not heal very quickly. That's why we find that surgeons will often make incisions along the lines of cleavage to allow for faster healing. The subcutaneous layer is not part of the integument. It consists of both adipose tissue and areolar tissue. It has a great amount of circulation and is considered a blood reservoir because it can hold a large volume of blood. A subcutaneous injection is an injection into the region with a hypodermic needle, and it is used here because there are no vital organs located here. Now we're going to talk about the accessory structures, and we'll start with the hair and the hair follicle. The hairs will project above the surface of the skin. They start way down in the dermis area. The hair follicles are organs that produce the hair. The hair root is the portion that anchors the hair into the skin. The hair shaft is the portion that is seen on the surface of the skin. The cuticle is the layer that forms the outer surface of the shaft. A hard keratin makes up the cell content of both the cortex and the cuticle. The hair papilla is connective tissue that contains both arteries and nerves. It's sort of an indented area at the bottom of the hair root, and the hair bulb are the epithelial cells that surround the end of this hair where it starts to bulge out slightly. There are different types of hair. There's lanugo. This is a fine and unpigmented hair that appears in embryonic life and shed before birth. There are vellus hairs that are found over most of the body. It's the peach fuzz that's real fine and located over much of the body surface. And then finally there are terminal hairs, and these are heavy, deeply pigmented, and sometimes curly hair seen throughout life in the scalp area, under the armpits, and in the pubic areas. Hair color is determined by the melanocytes. The different forms of melanin will give the hair a dark brown, a yellow brown, or a red color of hair. Red hair has actually iron in it. White hair in later years result from the lack of pigment and the presence of air bubbles in the medulla. Hair has a couple of functions. It protects the scalp from UV radiation. When it's found in the ear and in the nostrils, it helps to prevent the entry of foreign particles and insects into those areas. And then we also see this muscle here called the Erector Pili muscle. The Erector Pili muscle is a smooth muscle. When it contracts, the hair stands up on end and you get goosebumps. In the hair matrix, this is where the hair production begins. The basal cells near the center of the matrix divide, producing daughter cells that push towards the surface. Keratinization takes place and is complete by the time the daughter cells reach the surface. Scalp hair grows for 2 to 5 years. It varies in individuals. The root cells of growing hair can also absorb nutrients and incorporate them into the hair. Hair with a healthy dose of B vitamins and biotin will look very healthy and shiny. And with deficiencies, the hair can become brittle and break off. Hair analysis then can show evidence of deficiencies in vitamins in a person. We can also analyze hair to show poisoning, and we can also analyze it to get a DNA fingerprint. At the end of a growth cycle, if the follicle becomes inactive, then the hair will no longer grow. We're going to talk about 2 different types of glands in the skin. There are sebaceous glands and there are sweat glands. We'll start out with the sebaceous glands. A sebaceous gland is a holocrine gland, so the cells are going to completely become destroyed when they secrete their secretion. These glands secrete a waxy, oily secretion into the hair follicles that eventually end up on the surface of the skin. The oily secretion is made up of triglycerides, cholesterol, and proteins. This secretion helps to inhibit growth of bacteria and lubricates the keratin of the hair shaft and the surrounding skin. A sebaceous follicle is a much larger gland that's not connected to hair follicles. Its secretions will end up directly onto the surface of the skin through a pore. We find sebaceous follicles in areas like the face, the back, the chest, and nipples. There are 2 types of sweat glands, which are also called sudoriferous glands. There's the apocrine sweat gland. This is found in the armpits, around the nipples, and in the groin, and they secrete their secretions directly into the hair follicle. They produce a sticky, cloudy, and odorous secretion. The merocrine sweat glands are more superficial. They don't extend as far into the dermis as the apocrine glands do. They are most common in the palms of the hands and the soles of the feet. They function to cool the surface of the skin, to reduce body temperature by excreting water. but along with the water, electrolytes are excreted. And they also contain antibacterial components to protect from environmental hazards. There are other integumentary glands, such as the mammary glands, that we don't see here. The mammary glands are anatomically related to apocrine sweat glands, and they secrete the milk. There's also ceruminous glands. Ceruminous glands are found in the ear, and they secrete a substance called cerumen, which is ear wax. All these glandular secretions are under autonomic control. Part of the autonomic nervous system controls these glands. When the apocrine glands are stimulated, all of the apocrine glands will start secreting. But with the merocrine glands, they're a little more localized and a little more specific. And so when some of the merocrine glands secrete, that doesn't mean all the merocrine glands will secrete. For instance, your hands can sweat, the palms of your hands can sweat, but the other merocrine glands in the body do not secrete at the same time. It's just a few things that we want to show about the anatomy of the nails. The body of the nails is the portion of the nail that we can see. The nail root is where nail production actually begins. The cells go through mitosis, and as the cells are pushed forward, they go through the process of keratinization to make that nail body hard. The changes in the shape, structure, and appearance of nails can assist in the diagnosis of disease. Sometimes the pitting of nails indicates a deficiency of some vitamins. Ridging on the nails can also indicate a deficiency. The area of tissue just below the tip of the nail body that extends beyond the skin is called the hyponychium. The area of tissue right where the nail body connects to the nail root is called the eponychium. When the skin is damaged, we see a process called injury and repair. The stem cells in the epithelial and connective tissue help in the regeneration of the skin. There are 4 stages that occur in this regeneration process. We're going to talk about each one of the steps. In the first step, what we see is that there is an injury. There's been a cut that is extended through the epidermis and then down through the dermal layers. Because it is extended into the dermal layers, blood vessels have been cut, and we see blood at this area. Mast cells in the area will trigger an inflammatory response. After several hours, a scab has formed to stop the bleeding, and cells that are found in the stratum basal layer of the epidermis start to migrate along the edges of the wound. There are other phagocytic cells in the area that start to remove debris, and these cells are arriving by the increased circulation in the area. The clotting helps to isolate the region. About 1 week after the injury, the scab has been undermined by the epidermal cells that have completely surrounded it, and those epidermal cells are now going through the process of mitosis and creating more layers of epidermis. The phagocytic activity around the site has almost ended, and the fibrin clot starts to break up. After several weeks, the scab has been shed and the epidermis is complete, and a shallow depression marks the injury site. Fibroblasts in the dermis continue to create scar tissue that eventually will elevate the overlying epidermis. This ends our segment on the integumentary system, focusing on the dermis.